Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and on behalf of the Three Counties Defence and Security Group, may I wish you a warm welcome to today's webinar, the theme of which is emerging technologies to enable operations from 2025 onwards. And we'll also provide an update on the regional defence clusters as well. Just by way of housekeeping, please keep your microphone on mute unless you'd like to ask a question verbally. I'll come back to that in a moment. Please keep your cameras on if you're comfortable to do that. And please do be aware that today's seminar is being recorded. For anybody who was at last week's seminar, the recording is on its way, and we'll post a link to that shortly on our website, and you'll also receive an email with a link to that as well. My name is Richard Hopkins. I am from Waymarker Financial, and I'm one of the 5 volunteer partners who run the Three Counties Defence and Security Group, or the group, and we do that on behalf of our members. Also with me today are the other volunteer partners, and these are Sam Lewis and Lisa O'Neill from Hereford Enmite, Rebecca Kirk from Harrison Clark Rickaby Solicitors, and along with Tom Thorne, who's also from Harrison Clark Rickaby's, and who is managing all the IT today. And additionally with us today is Richard Morgan, who is the group president, and you'll hear from very shortly. And of course, the group CEO, Anna Roby-Welford from Altiora Marketing. Just for anyone new to our seminars and the group, we're a not-for-profit organisation. We aim to bring businesses in the defence and security sector together to collaborate, and in doing so, support economic development of the sector and locally, and support service charities, small businesses and veterans along the way. Our sister organisation is the Three Counties Defence and Security Exhibition, and the group provides a network and events such as this one through the year to provide the opportunity to keep topics alive and members connected. After today, our next event can be found on our website and will be posted in today's comments, and which is a face-to-face seminar scheduled for the 31st of March. That will take place in Hereford, starting at 4 p.m, running through till 7 p.m. And the theme of that will be a focus on export. We've got speakers from the UK Export Finance, from the Department of International Trade, Australia House, and one of our members will also talk about their experiences as a business of export work. And I look forward to the Three Counties Defence and Security Exhibition taking place in Malvern. That's going to take place in November this year. Day 1 is Wednesday the 2nd of November, and that will be the MOD Special Projects Industry Day. The expo and conference will run from Thursday the 3rd, on Thursday the 3rd of November, and inquiries can be made to Anna at 3cdse.co.uk, and we'll also put that link in the chat as well. Returning to today's webinar, as a reminder, please be aware that today's seminar is being recorded, and we'll email out the link following webinar. I'll shortly hand over to Richard Morgan, and who will provide an update regarding the regional defence cluster. If you've got any comments and questions as we go through, please post these in the chat section, not the Q&A section. Just put them straight in the chat, and we'll pull these out for the speakers in the Q&As. With that, I'll hand over to Richard Morgan.
Thank you, Richard Hopkins. As Richard has indicated, my name is Richard Morgan. I'm Head of Defence, Security and Forces Sector Services at HCR Solicitors. And my colleague with me today, Rebecca Kirk, is an employment law partner and another member of the DSF group at HCR, who are founders of the Three Counties Defence and Security Group and the Expo. Just as a quick recap on where we are with the Regional Defence and Security Cluster project, by way of a quick review, this was a concept introduced by the government's defence reviews in March 2021, the idea being for a collaboration between military procurement, industry and academia via a secure online platform to provide solutions to procurement's technology requirements. That certainly appeared to us to be a real opportunity and enable this group to progress from standalone annual events via the Expo to continuous activity seeking commercial opportunities for our membership. We've treated the lead project as the Three Counties Regional Defence and Security Cluster, That has brought together, under the auspices of this group, the 3 LEPs covering Worcestershire, Gloucestershire and Herefordshire via the Marches LEP. And a very valuable recent addition to that group has been Professor Kamal Bakoum, who is head of the Faculty of Computer Science at the University of Gloucestershire and a very high-profile figure in national cyber security. We also have brought together in the South East Midlands the Northamptonshire LEP, along with Silverstone Technology Cluster and Cranfield University, and also a third nascent group in Lincolnshire under the auspices of the University of Lincolnshire, where Julian Field, who's former military himself, is Vice Chancellor and has strong links with the local RAF Waddington base. Anna Roby-Walford has been key to this, and she has studied and been greatly assisted by the Southwest Cluster, which was treated by HMG as the pilot scheme. That is resourced on a 50-50 basis by the Southwest LEP and by Babcock being one of the predominant industry representatives in that region. To try and replicate that activity, the 3 LEPs in the 3 counties asked for a business case to set out the objectives and expected returns of the cluster project, to enable them to secure funding from their funders to enable the resourcing of the cluster in the 3 counties. So we have an emerging document, which the first draft of which was created by HCR's DSF group. And the first edit has been undertaken by Tony White, the Chief Technology Officer at Ultra Electronics in Cheltenham, who is a long-standing friend of 3CDSG and the Expo, having been involved in that project from the start. And he's conducted that review and edit along with Innovate UK to give an industry perspective, which is obviously key to the success of the whole project. So that business case is now with Worcestershire and Gloucestershire LEPs, who have committed to undertaking their review and edit by the end of the current month. And a final review will be done by the Marches LEP, with a view to that business case then being in a completely agreed format between all the participants, and that will then serve as a template for the other 2 groups in South East Midlands and Lincolnshire. So it's still a work in progress, there's still work to be done, but it's a project that has its challenges, but we think there's enough value in the potential success of such a project, particularly for this group, that it's worth persevering with. And we'll continue to create that business case and seek funding in all regions during the course of the first half of this year. So I'll try and update the membership as that progresses, but that's just a summary of where we are at the moment.
Thank you very much, Richard. I'm sure there'll be more about that at the next seminar and every seminar going forward, actually, for people to keep up to date with. Okay, there aren't any questions from what I can see about the defence cluster. So let's move straight on to our first speaker. Our first speaker today is from Lockheed Martin, and Olly is an architect and technical lead for Lockheed Martin's UK cyber and electromagnetic activities. We were just smiling before the webinar began, because the reason Olly's on today is because he was supposed to speak at last year's seminar at the end of the exhibition, and we were rudely interrupted by peace protesters throughout that day, and so the event was closed early, and I think Olly ended up presenting to a very small team. But it was a good warm-up, because I understand you got married a week later or 2 weeks later, so it was a warm-up to your wedding speech. So Olly's got a background in project delivery, stakeholder engagement, requirements management and integration engineering. He's been with the MOD for over 10 years with a variety of teams, both in the special projects and force protection areas. So Olly, thank you very much for supporting today's event, and over to you.
Thank you very much. I will just share my screen. Hopefully everybody can see me a nice big blue screen. Yes, welcome. Yeah, I'm just here today to talk about open architectures, but specifically MORA, and I'll dive into what that is in a moment. But first of all, I thought I'd just clarify what I mean by open architectures. So I've just got a couple of slides just to cover on that. So what is an open architecture? I think a good way to think about it, and that is accessible for a lot of people, is to look at the comparisons between a laptop and a desktop computer. They're all very familiar devices for us. They're built to perform the same or similar tasks, but for different types of employment. And what I mean by that is, one is designed to be employed in a mobile fashion, although with COVID, maybe not. And one is more a traditional sort of desktop that would sit under your desk at work or at home, and so therefore less modular, but still performing the same tasks, computing. One, you can argue, is based heavily on common designs, open architectures, standards and specifications, which include common interfaces such as PCIe, with an expectation that that system will have to change through its life, and so therefore it must empower it and adapt to the user's vision as the equipment matures. Whereas the other one is traditionally more constrained, based purely on the manufacturer's vision, i.e. you will have the laptop as I build it, because that's what I've done and it won't be changed. And in that scenario, there's a lot more mixture of the common components and interfaces, along with OEM specialist parts that usually will be soldered directly to boards, and so therefore it's more resistant to change, and doesn't really allow the user to adapt it to their vision, or adapt it over time. Both do their jobs very well, but they're architecturally different, and that impacts the flexibility. So now that I've explained what an open architecture is in this concept, why is openness worth talking about today? So when we consider openness, I've outlined some benefits here based on the previous example of a laptop versus a desktop. The considerations that you make early on impacts how much of the benefits you can realize on a system. Ideally, you should identify the benefits and targets you wish to achieve early, so that you're not having to go back and rework anything as you go through a design and delivery cycle. It should also be highlighted that in having those conversations, it will condition you and your considerations that you make throughout the project. So really doing that up front will save a lot of effort. If I hopefully click, something should highlight now. Hey, great. So I've highlighted just a couple here to explain what I mean, and sort of drill down on a couple of elements. So for instance, business impacts, the business behaviors that your business has, its processes, its structures, can impact how you approach openness, and then ultimately how you implement openness within your designs. Your business process and structures need to be permissive to enable you to achieve the openness that you set out at the beginning. And if they don't, and you're unable to change them, then that will stop you reaching the goal that you set yourself for openness. So it's important to bear that in mind. Ultimately, we have parameters to work in. Then influences. Influence could be a traditional influence, such as like the PESEL example, so political, economical. But especially in the military domain, you should also consider things such as doctrine and standards that the customer will publish, because that tells you how they could use it, which then could influence how open you think it needs to be. Moving through into benefits, if we just stop on cost first. Your considerations, costs will play a huge factor. It'll impact how common and modular the system is, and how much cost efficiencies can be identified throughout its life, and then how those efficiencies can be managed. So it's not just the cost that you attribute to the project up front, but actually how you envisage it, the openness enabling costs and efficiencies to be identified through life that should come into your thinking. And then finally, agility. When an open standard is implemented, I'm going to say correctly or commonly, then you should be able to find through the use of it in the way in which it was envisaged, you should be able to get the natural modularity that those standards provide, therefore enabling your users a measure of agility. If they have standardized interfaces that they understand how those interfaces work, then they're able to exchange them with similar or common interfaces that they can find on available devices, which means that they can change the mission very quickly, hence agility, or get an unserviceable piece of equipment back into service, and therefore enabling the mission agility. So I'm here to talk about MORA today. So what is MORA? Well, it's an open architecture, and here is just a very quick highlight about why open architectures and MORA is becoming important. I'm from Lockheed Martin, so we do a lot of business in the US. So this is a good example. There are similar ones seen in the UK, but this is the one I've picked for today. So within the US, they began a change program back in 2017, known as MOSA, or the Modular Open Systems Initiative. Then in 2019, the US DoD further demonstrated their commitment to this endeavor by releasing a tri-service memo, which from the air, land, and sea services, cementing that they are committed to modular and open systems that are that have common and flexible architectures. And then finally, in 2021, it actually entered into law, and now all major defence acquisitions must employ, and I've bullet pointed here just some of the language used in that title, but effectively must employ modular design and the good behaviours that you see in these types of common standards. And the common standards that actually was birthed by the MOSA initiative. In the air domain, you have FACE, and the land domain, you have CMOS, which has a subcomponent victory, and actually MORA, which I'm about to speak about, is a component of that. And then finally, HOST for the naval domain. So yes, what is MORA? It's an open architecture. So MORA stands for Modular Open Radio Frequency Architecture. As I mentioned a moment ago, it's a component of the US Victory architecture, which is the US's version of what in the UK and NATO understand as the generic vehicle architecture. And it is a key component of the US Army's CMOS standard, which is a standard open architecture for electronic warfare and communications, as well as ISR. And it's something that's picking up a lot of momentum in the US at the moment in the land domain. And just with sort of all defense standards, it's managed by defense. So in this case, it's managed by the US Information Warfare Directorate, specifically CCDC. But what MORA aims to do is really strongly aligned to that of the objectives of MOSA, but specifically focus on the RF systems and subsystems. So some of the aims of MORA for its design and development are that solutions take advantage of the cost benefits of open modular architectures, and that it standardizes control, signal, and digital interfaces in the RF subsystems to enable agile and scalable solutions to be developed that are mutually interoperable with very little additional interfaces being specified, if any. And really what this enables is the system to have a common way in which it can the system or the applications that are hosted on the system to start, reserve, run, and stop RF resources as required. And ultimately, by allowing that to sit, and by generating that in the RF subsystem, it means that you reduce duplication and therefore reduce the wastage and optimize the swaps, the size, weight, power, and cooling of a host platform, whether it be a person or a vehicle, which was traditionally seen in some of the legacy stovepipe systems, where you would duplicate RF filters, power amplifiers, etc., for each stovepipe. So for today, I just wanted to very briefly touch on some high-level parts of the MORA specification and just introduce it, really. It's published online. You can get it through a lot of the US government portals, so all the detail is really there. But from a hardware perspective, there's three components. There's what's known as the radio head, which is traditionally the antenna, and perhaps the mounting bracket. What MORA does, however, is it doesn't specify what it always must be, so it may include other components as well. That then connects into a conditioning system, which effectively takes the analog signal and provides it with its signal conditioning. So whether that be power amplification, bandpass filtering, in order to ensure that the receive or transmit chain are clean and timed correctly. And then finally, it connects to the software-defined radio, which I think quite a lot of people in defence are quite aware of these days, but a processing component that will enable multiple different types of application to be operated on the device. And really what MORA enables, at least in the baseline implementation, is that software-defined nature to extend outside of the software-defined radio into the signal conditioning. Perhaps not quite up to the antenna yet, but that's certainly the plan. So here briefly, there's some common interfaces in MORA, which are required to operate a MORA system. So you have what they call the ML2B, which is a low latency bus. This is for the exchange of detailed RF messages, such as those seen in Vita49, but effectively those will send command and control messages to the system, asking it to tune to the relevant radio frequency parameters as the application requires at the correct timing intervals, hence the low latency, so it can switch very quickly between transmit and receive as required. You then have what traditionally in MORA is known as the Victory data bus, although here I've called platform because in the UK, as we start to adopt standards like this, we don't necessarily have the same architectural names, and so therefore it's flexible. But not only that, it's a platform layer. So in the NATO generic sense, it could be a generic vehicle or a generic soldier. It doesn't really matter. And what that layer enables is the basic exchange of network control and health information, as well as the initial system discovery. And so that sets the network up really for the ML2B to operate, as well as it also has the benefit of having an interface that is always present with the platform, and therefore some risks are mitigated now because the radio system is now self-aware of when the platform moves. An example of this is if a turret rotates, for instance, the system can be notified of that, and therefore if the antenna is blocked by the turret rotation, but the vehicle is still traveling in its original axis, it allows the system to maybe reroute that signal to an antenna that isn't blocked by the turret. And then finally, you've got the traditional radio, and that's really where the core IQ signal data will be carried, whether it's fiber or coax, doesn't really matter. That's dependent on your system, but that's where the raw signal data sits. Now, within MORA, there's many different software components, so I've only touched on three that I deem most important from the standard and as a system developer. Two of the functions are very generic functions that you'll find in commercial solutions, but the last one is more MORA specific. So you have zero configuration. This is network discovery. It's used on all types of networks internationally, defense or civil, and really it's just that TCP/IP discovery layer, and provides, and once that's achieved its output, it will provide a communication layer for SOAP, which is the network configuration, and that's the network reservation and allocation as well. And then finally, you've got the MORA data messages. These are specific, although they are derived from the Vita 49 and 49.2 explicitly interfaces. But effectively, these, as I mentioned a moment ago, are your detailed RF commands and configurations that the applications would demand of the system. And that is the manner in which they would ask for those resources in a common format with no bespoke messages. So to help explain those past couple of slides, I've just briefly put an end-to-end system together. So here you have a software-defined radio, and that's connected all the way through the signal conditioning up to the antenna by the analog RF. So where your IQ data and the raw RF will be transported. But then you have the data and control planes carrying their relevant components, so the MDMs and zero confidence SOAP, to configure that RCD unit that sits in the middle, and to ensure that the system end-to-end can be achieved. And I think that's everything. Thank you.
Thanks, Ollie. Thank you very much for that. It reminded me, the first time I heard the phrase open architecture, we were talking about taking the doors off Land Rovers. That was about as sophisticated as it got. Now it's kind of moved on a little bit these days. We've got a couple of questions in the chat from, if I can find it. Bear with me.
Yes, I can see them.
Can you see them? Sorry, I was about to read them out, but the little chat box has vanished. Would you mind?
Yep.
If you can answer those.
So the question from Richard Morgan about if there's similar programs in the UK. Yes, there are programs in the UK that are looking to use MORA, mainly coming out of Satcom. However, we are seeing interest in these standards internationally in the Five Eyes and in Europe. As typical with a lot of defense, they shadow each other. In the US, there is already quite a significant sort of drive towards MORA and systems that use it. And Lockheed explicitly in the US have won and delivered some contracts that utilize the framework, as well as competitors. In the UK, there are a couple of large programs coming out of teams such as Force Protection and Special Projects potentially as well, that are looking to use this sort of architecture. And potentially those systems could be interoperable through this architecture.
Okay, thanks, Ollie. The next one is just, I don't know whether you'll be able to give us specifics here, but are there current components of opportunities? So we've got
yes.
members who might be developing something that you can use.
Yes, it certainly is. So Lockheed in the UK has started what they call an SME or small medium enterprise unite framework, which is a great way for multiple of the Lockheed Martin programs to see recommended suppliers and what they can offer, as well as potentially any history of what they supplied. So there's a number of things going out through that at the moment. Outside of that, we've got and really have been doing since about 2020 little purchase orders to to obtain open architectures kit towards some R&D work that we've been doing, which really demonstrates MORA and some of the other open architectures that exist in an integrated system. And with the MOD and the US as well drive towards open architectures, that's only going to grow really. So there are certainly opportunities, some sooner than others, but I don't have any details that I can share today.
Okay, if we can obtain some detail on how people would access that or explore that further, we can we'll send those out on the email after the event if we can get those. I'm sure we can. Okay, so I'm just gonna move on now. I'm sure we can come back if there are some more questions on this particular topic. I'm sure we can come back at the end. I'm keen to get the speakers pieces done, and then we can circle back on any of this. Ollie, you're staying on, I think, aren't you? So you can answer some things a little later.
Yes, I am.
Great. There is a quick one. Will Lockheed be at 3 CDSE this year in November?
Oh, that's not a decision that's in my pay grade. I will probably defer that to my business development gentleman, but I believe he has a plan to.
Yeah, we'll leave it with you. Okay, thank you very much. Thanks, Ollie. We'll come back to you with any further questions. Okay, so moving on now to Tom Farmer. Tom is Head of Marketing at Paradigm. Tom is actually relatively new to the industry, having spent the last decade in industrial manufacturing. So he brings a completely fresh view, I would expect, to similar issues and topics. So we're really interested to hear what you've got to say, Tom. Tom's also joined by Warren Ackerley, who's the Business Development Director for Paradigm. And according to Tom, Warren has 150 years of professional experience in this sector. So I think we can take from that he's quite experienced. But Warren's worked with global satellite communications, began with Skynet and NATO comms in the Royal Air Force, and subsequently held a couple of senior roles with satellite service providers and manufacturers across the globe. So we've got some great experience there to tap into today with the questions. So Tom, you're the speaker, and I think both you and Warren are going to field any questions. So over to you, Tom.
Thank you, Richard. I will be more careful what I say in future. I didn't realise I was going to be quoted. He's kicking me under the desk. Right, let me share my screen with you. Does that come up? Great stuff. Not quite as slick as yours, Ollie, but we got there. So I'm here to talk to you today about keeping quiet with Satcom at the tactical edge. What does that mean? It means looking at how the advancements in Satcom technology are helping us to maintain our strategic advantage, basically, when communicating in critical conditions. For those of you who haven't heard Paradigm, we're not quite as big as Lockheed Martin. But we've been around for about 25 years. We're privately owned, global Satcom manufacturer. And we actually started 25 years ago in the distribution and installation business. But as time went on, we realized that our speed of response and our understanding of the nuances of use case and supply chain actually would be really as valuable, if not more so, on the manufacturing front. So about 10 or 12 years ago, we started manufacturing small, portable, easy to use Satcom terminals. And that's the capacity in which I'm speaking with you today. Over the years, Satcom has become much smaller, much more portable. It's more energy efficient, and they're capable of dealing with higher throughputs. But all of that is only helpful on a practical level if it's simple to use. And so 10 years ago, when we set out to begin manufacturing our own kit, that was the objective that we set out with, basically to make Satcom as easy to use as a mobile phone. So that's what I'm going to talk about, and why it is that you're hearing from Paradigm. In terms of you knowing that we know what we're talking about, Well, during that 25 years, we've worked with a variety of government, military, special operational forces and intelligence communities. We've also run our distribution business globally and are very familiar with the supply chain and experience in navigating the nuances that you'll all be familiar with, no doubt. And we design and manufacture in-house to evolving military requirements, which means that we have a bedrock of R&D experience, and the things that we talk about today are very much from the horse's mouth. So, modern warfare, changing tactics. Discoverability by enemy technology is an increasing threat, as you know. Its importance is obvious. It can impact not only on the success of OSR missions, but could directly impact survivability. And the speed of detectability has increased, which reduces cover and increases exposure. This puts an increased pressure on our in-field comms capability to not only deploy more quickly, but also to transition and relocate just as quickly, and to reduce the overall comms signature. How is Satcom specifically contributing to overcoming these challenges? Well, hardware flexibility is providing interfacing that is far more seamless than it was just 10 or 15 years ago. New software developments are allowing dynamic, intelligent switching between networks in field. A focus on designing for extreme use case specifically is quickening deployment and the transition process. And all of the above contributes to that lighter comms signature. And I'm hoping this will follow on quite nicely from you, Olly. There's two words that you mentioned, modularity and commonality, that I think are really very pertinent here. So I mentioned at the beginning, this advanced technology is only useful if it's easy to use. And what we've seen over the last few years is user interfaces, therefore, being simplified significantly. And the objective being for it really to be as intuitive as it is when you pick up one of these, a mobile phone. Peripherals also now just work with routing and switching capabilities that present a zero configuration, peripheral, modem, hub interface. I mentioned network switching. The introduction of a single central management and control interface that's agnostic as far as modems are concerned has broadened the application of Satcom terminal hardware significantly. The emergence of field changeable modules on a single terminal offers multiple options through a single terminal solution, which allows in-field frequency band switching. And this can all be achieved now with zero in-field configuration. So gone are the days of needing in-field engineering expertise or even Satcom expertise. It's so easy and intuitive to use now that we have examples literally of 13-year-old children being able to set up and operate Satcom terminals. And in fact, this capability is evolving so quickly. We've even introduced recently an intelligent in-field network switching that doesn't require any change of hardware in the field. Quite literally, at the click of a button, operators are able to switch in a matter of seconds between, for example, Velocity, Evolution, and GX networks. What else contributes to the light communication signature? Well, as well as automated links that reduce the initial time of setup, there are two further advancements that contribute significantly to the light comm signature. One is the ability to mute, so silencing the terminal until it's needed, and that can be particularly useful while in transit. And the ability to enter the terminal into a commission state or auto reconnect state, which allows power off between uses while powering on immediately into a transmit state. So the industry has gone a step further than rapid deployment into rapid transition, which is enhancing agility and essentially, going back to that objective I spoke about at the beginning, increasing survivability. This is achieved through user interfaces that are simple and intuitive, but also that are common. They host an integrated modem, router, power distribution, RF control, all of the components fundamental to operating a Satcom terminal. Pointing no longer relies on a spectrum analyzer. And with the capability to be paired with whatever hardware is most suitable for the use case, solutions really are becoming bespoke to the needs of those who are using them in the field. The other benefit of this, of course, is economy. Having common hardware that can power all of your other hardware significantly reduces the need for training time and therefore expense. The result of these advancements in technology is more agile operations. I've thrown in a couple of case studies. I think it's helpful, we use words like agile and things quite frequently in this industry, and I think it's useful just to put it into context. So there's an example here from the RAF who did a Himalayan expedition just a couple of years ago. And, what does it mean for a terminal to be small and portable? Well, in this case, using a small flat panel terminal called the Swarm, they were able to hand carry the terminal up the mountain. Having units that are truly ruggedized, as well as being built to meet military standards, meant that it could withstand sub-zero temperatures, snowfall, and even altitude, and maintained throughout those conditions sufficient speed and clarity of communication for them to be able to communicate between team members and also back to base. And it was straightforward enough for them to train in team. So once they were up on the expedition, where some team members were less familiar with the technology or the particular assets that they were using, it was simple enough for team members to teach each other whilst they were out in the field. And I think this is maybe my favorite piece of feedback. The squadron leader said that using the Swarm was like having the equivalent of a home Wi-Fi system whilst living at over 5,000 meters. Similarly, we saw some units go out with a combat camera operation team recently, and the integration of just a few of these capabilities into daily operation for those who need global reach and transmission of HD video saw increased media quality and transmission capability, and this is from challenging environments all over the world. Increased equipment management confidence and capability because of simplicity of use, and increased C4ISR capability and therefore mission success. In terms of the broader reach show and Satcom's role in it, it's having a substantial impact on the degree of interoperability and effective intelligence gathering through command control communications computers. Satcom provides a highly dynamic model that allows operators to remain separated, of course, from traditional headquarters, localizing last mile communications that are perfect really for negotiating a changing battle space. Essentially, Satcom facilitates continued exchange between the dispersed field of operations and HQ. Communication between these local dispersed communications elements is more difficult to track and therefore more difficult to counterattack, the agility of which can be further enhanced, of course, through the use of vehicle-mounted systems. But really, this fundamentally contributes to better survivability and more agile, secure comms. So I've run through that a little quicker, I think, than anticipated, but that concludes our overview of the use of Satcom at the tactical edge.
Thank you very much, Tom. Sorry, I'm struggling to find the right boxes to click today. Thank you very much. That was really clear and really engaging. We've got a question here on impacts. What impacts do you see from the UK's exclusion from systems as a result of Brexit and from the plans of Musk and others to launch mass commercial satellite operations? Is that for you, Tom, or for Warren? I'm just going to ask a communications company to take the mute button off.
I think we've done it. Are we there?
Perfect. Yeah.
So Elon Musk with the Starlink system is pushing back the barriers and exercising new uses of the technology in I don't know. His ability to be able to provide low latency web access is excellent. However, all the low Earth orbiting communication satellites are still trying to find their markets. OneWeb, Starlink, Telsat Canada, they'll all find their niches, and I think the Starlink and everybody else there are still trying to find their way. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, partly. So, I'm not necessarily up to date with the most recent news, but there was a lot of debate in the press about the impact on the UK and other states of exclusion from the Galileo program and other programs as a result of Brexit. And I just wondered what, if any, impact that has on the sort of systems that we're talking about today.
Okay, virtually none, only because yes, we've been excluded from Galileo, but there's a government initiative to put our own system in place, and that'll take some time. But the UK is part of the European Space Agency and continues to be so. So, and the European Space Agency and the UK industry in general, they encourage collaboration between the UK and European entities. Paradigm today is working with a Spanish company on some development, as it happens. So it's had more impact on our ability to be able to ship things quickly than on our ability to be able to innovate.
Thanks, Warren. So I've got a question around where the development opportunities are, and bear with me because I'm not a very technical person, but if I divide this up into software, hardware, power, possibly even bandwidth, where do you see the opportunities are now? Because I kind of, as a layman, sense that some of those things are, you know, what else can we possibly think of in some of those areas? Is it all about software now, and really the hardware is kind of optimized, or can you see something in all those areas?
So to make the hardware work efficiently and flexibly, there's always opportunities for software. But from an industry perspective, the development of the flat panel array, so that people don't physically have to point a parabolic antenna, we have electronically steered arrays. So for instance, in the car industry, there's a lot of development and research going on to put satellite communications on the roof of a car, for instance. And there's half a dozen technologies out there that are quite well advanced and operate just fine. but it's a matter of everybody's working on the form factors and efficiencies. As soon as you move away from a parabolic antenna, the antennas start to get more inefficient. So you need higher power satellites and to be able to cope with the inefficiencies in the earth stations.
Okay, so it sounds more about innovating software to make the hardware more efficient, because I assume there's only a limit to physics, and the hardware is probably more constrained by physics than the software. But
that's correct.
Yeah. Okay. So thank you very much, Warren. Have we got any more questions from the attendees or panelists? Okay, I suppose my last question, maybe for either for Ollie, Tom, or Warren, really, and it might be too big a question, but I'm just intrigued by how sophisticated everything is becoming. You know, from the kit and communications and systems and processes of 25 years ago that I first encountered to what they look like now. We would never have imagined what the future battlefield might look like and what technology would be on the battlefield today 25 years ago. And I suppose it's maybe it's too big a question, but I just wonder whether we are generating a vulnerability overall. I suppose it's a bit like the events in Ukraine at the moment and the global effect they've had, because the global supply chain and interconnectivity has made us so interdependent on each other, and one regional conflict has now spread globally. I suppose, Mark, I'm thinking in the same way with open architecture and with the sophistication of the sort of communication systems that you guys are talking about. Do you think there's we're layering up risk of vulnerability there to something that perhaps, for want of a better example, takes out all the satellites and everything rolls on from there, or something that takes out all the land platforms and everything rolls on from there? Or do you guys feel quite comfortable that the protection measures are in place and will continue to protect us from such a vulnerability?
I'll just, Ollie, I think this is definitely lies more in your arena from a cryptographic perspective, but from yes, systems are vulnerable. Ollie, I don't know if you saw the news. Viasat had a problem, and they think that and took out some of the communications terminals in the Ukraine and Europe. They think that was down to some denial type of bug software. So we're certainly vulnerable, but bearing in mind that the Viasat system that went down was a commercial system, not a military system. So there's different layers of protection that the powers that be put in place for particular operations or systems and use cases. Are we making ourselves vulnerable? Absolutely. But we just have to I don't know, take one step at a time and manage it while we can. We'd be silly not to take advantage of it. I mean, the Ukrainians are taking advantage of Turkish technology with some of the UAVs that they're using. So and also I read an article recently that one of the reasons the Russian advance has been slowed up was because of the Ukrainians' use of multiple arena communications. So they had a better overall picture of the battle space than the Russians did, which allowed them to manage things in a much more efficient way. So, what do you think, Ollie?
Yes, no, I agree. I think we have to accept there's always going to be vulnerabilities and risk, and it's just about adding layers to protect against them. Systems get more complex, yes, but with complexity also becomes a layer of protection to a degree, because you're able to consider how the system is designed to be functioned, but then also how it could go wrong and make it more predictable and reliable. And by doing that, you make it more secure as well. So I think ultimately there's only so much you can control. So there will be a vulnerability somewhere, whether it's inside your system or how your system interacts with its environment, or what the user does. There's no way to stop vulnerabilities, just add layers of protection to avoid them. And like you say, the example there of what happened with Viasat is a great example. You can have great systems, but if you take out a node, you've broken the system. There isn't much you can do if somebody deliberately breaks something.
Well, thanks, Ollie. I know that was quite a big question at the end, but I'll take that you guys are confident that whilst there might be vulnerabilities, they can be the protection can be layered up and mitigated. Thank you very much to all our speakers today. I can't see any more questions. Thank you everyone for attending. Please don't forget, I hope that it was useful. As we say, we'll send out some links and information afterwards as well. Please do see our 3CDSG website, 3cdsg.co.uk. There are various links on there around the Ukrainian situation. There are links on there to, or there will be a video link on there to last week's seminar, which focused on the economic impact, global impacts and considerations of the Ukrainian situation. So please do take a look at that. And as I say, our next seminar is face-to-face. It'll be in Hereford. There'll be a bite to eat and a bar. It's from 4 till 7 p.m. on the 31st of March. And it will be focusing on defence export. We've got some really great speakers. So if you haven't been to a face-to-face seminar for a while, please consider coming to ours. The information for that will also be on our website. An Eventbrite link will be generated in due course as well. So thank you everyone, and thank you to all the organisers in the background, particularly to the speakers today for taking the time to prepare for and deliver two really interesting, engaging talks. We're very grateful, and thank you to the attendees as well. And with that, I will draw us to a close. Thank you.